your friendly online speech-language pathologist and specialist in children's communication and behavior development. If you want to find out more about me, there are some links in the box below, but don't turn off the video because today we're going to talk about proprioception, which is the next topic in our very exciting series on sensory needs, how we can recognize them, and how we can meet them in our children's lives. And not just in our children's lives, maybe in our own lives as well, because many of us did not get our sensory needs met when we were growing up because nobody knew about all of the various different sensory modalities that we as human beings have. Therefore, nobody could help us meet those needs. Sometimes we succeeded at meeting them in maybe some odd ways. Sometimes they just didn't get met and we didn't function so well. But once we learn about these different modalities and the ways that we might need a little extra input in those different areas, we can meet them ourselves. And proprioception is one of the big ones for me personally. It's very close to my heart because this is the one that my body craves, especially if I am tense, if I am nervous, if I am overly busy or tired. This is the one that demands attention in my own life. And it is also the one that demands attention in the lives of many of the kids that I've worked with and that I love, including my niece, one of my nieces. What is proprioception? Proprioception is the ability to sense pressure to the joints, the ligaments, the tendons, the bones in our bodies. Think about the ways that you might be able to tell that a child is trying to get more of that input into her body. She might crash into the wall. She might hide under the couch cushions, wrap herself up in the curtains, wrap herself up in a blanket, squeeze herself or her hands, or ask you to squeeze her. Try to get you to squeeze her head. That's something that seems to feel really good to many of our kids. Also, these kids might gnaw on things, bite their teeth, grind their teeth. There are many different reasons why we grind our teeth, why we like to bite on hard stuff or chew things, even ourselves sometimes. And I just did a video about that, so look up in the cards and you will be able to find that video. It was just last week. Now that we have an idea of whether our kid might need some more input in this area, let's talk about ways to meet those needs in helpful ways rather than in ways that maybe are not quite so socially acceptable, or maybe they're not very safe. We have ways that are safe and more socially acceptable. So let's talk about those. I also want to include adults in this video because I was just talking with my brother this last week, and we both have needs in this area, as does one of his daughters. And we have managed as adults to work out ways that we can get the input that we need, but it would have helped us to know this at a younger age. So I want to make sure that even if you didn't know this at an early age, that you can do it now, even if you're a grown-up. Now let us also divide this into sensory mealtime and what we can do throughout the day. Sensory mealtime is going to be anything where your child is able to get pressure. So we might choose a trampoline, super popular. Get your kid on a trampoline if at all possible. It's magnificent. Anything that your child can squeeze, things your child can bite on, lifting heavy things or pulling heavy things, a wagon full of books. Carry these books to the other room. Let's clean up the house together, but we're gonna have to move the couch. Can you lift it on that end? Good job. Anything where the child is doing something heavy, tug of war, stretchy exercise bands. If you can do little weightlifting activities with your child. Now, please be age appropriate. We can damage our children's bodies by having them lift things that are too heavy. So don't do that. Make sure that it's age appropriate. But heavy things, maybe very small dumbbells. Vacuuming is really good as a heavy work type of exercise. If you live in a cold climate, shoveling snow is a really great opportunity. Even pushing snow or putting it in a bucket and dumping it out, carrying buckets full of water, carrying a gallon of water to the kitchen table, carrying a little stack of plates. Anything you can do that's heavy, that requires resistance, is going to put that pressure on a child's body, as well as things that involve jumping or running. So if you can get your kid to run, that's fantastic. Running is the number one thing that has helped me in this area. I run 3 or 4 times a week now that my ankle has finally healed after my running injury a few years back. And it helps my whole body to reset. It's a miracle. Also, I do yoga, which is a great opportunity for deep pressure because just think about a pose where your butt is up in the air and your arms and your legs are holding you like a tent. You're getting that pressure to your hands, you're getting that pressure to your feet. You're even upside down, which is good for our vestibular sense, which we'll talk about next time. So it's just fantastic for this modality of our sensory system. Yoga and running, and I do a weight resistance routine, which is also great for kids if you can manage it. It's sometimes not the most fun, and once again, we don't really want to use weights with our kids, but we can still do resistance training with kids, especially these kids. And by the way, if you haven't watched the other videos in my series, please do that. I will put a link up there so that you can easily access that playlist. But a sensory diet doesn't have anything to do with what we're consuming by mouth. It has to do with the fact that our sensory system is kind of like a digestive system in that each particular type of sensory experience comes into our body, like food, and sometimes we don't get enough of it throughout the day. If you simply graze throughout the day, your stretch receptors in your stomach are never going to get activated. So even if you might have enough fuel, enough calories throughout the day, you wouldn't eat enough at any one time to feel satiated. And that's what's happening with many of our kids. They need more sensory input in these particular areas than a typically developing kid would, in a sensory developing kid. And they're not getting enough of that particular input throughout their day. So we need to give them chunks of input in those particular areas to make sure that we're filling up that little sensory stomach. So if I have a need, let's say a typical kid is here when it comes to proprioceptive input. Child A needs 10 proprioceptive inputs. I'm making that up. Per day. But my child B, needs 50 proprioceptive inputs per day. This child is able to get 10 just by playing outside and running around at recess. This child isn't. This child needs so much more that just those daily activities aren't going to be enough to get that need met. So we have to meet it in other ways. We have to add more to the child's day in various ways. The way we're talking about right now is chunking up time, maybe morning, afternoon, night, morning, before school, after school, before bed, that we can really shove in this proprioceptive input, do lots of fun proprioceptive activities so that the child can get that need met. And also we want to raise the level of proprioceptive activities that are just naturally occurring in the child's day, if at all possible. Sometimes that one's a little harder because, of course, many children are in school and we don't have a lot of control over that as their families. What we can do is talk to teachers and say, hello, we've noticed that proprioceptive input really, really helps Alice to focus and Focus means learning. So can she please have a break every 2 hours to jump on the trampoline? We will provide the trampoline. And sometimes teachers really love that. Of course, if your child is in a self-enclosed classroom, they probably have all this equipment available, but they might not have quite figured out your child's unique sensory system yet, so it can still be very helpful for you to share what you have learned. Back to sensory diet times, make a child burrito. There's something called a body sock, and it is a tight material that the child can see out, but you can't see in, and the child can push in any direction and the material pushes back. So it's very, very nice for deep pressure. Also, you can make a child burrito with any sort of rug, with a yoga mat, with a blanket. You just swaddle the child. That's all they really want. I also have used a yoga mat on the bottom. The child, I'm calling this a child sandwich because that's how we play it. I play this with my nieces. I played it with kids in my classroom. I asked them what they want on their sandwich, and they're usually the meaty part of the sandwich. And then we can put other blankets on top. We can put other yoga mats, but we make a sandwich. Layers of stuff on top of the child. And usually I sit on it. It's a good idea to have a yoga ball in your classroom accessible to you. I don't usually leave it accessible to the kids because it usually gets used for nefarious purposes, like throwing it at someone else's head or that kind of thing. But what we do is we put the child on the yoga mat and then we roll the yoga ball, exercise ball, on top of the child. We can sit on it. It really diffuses the weight so that it doesn't feel like a grown-up sitting on a child. It feels more calm. Also, weighted blankets are a good idea, and weighted vests, but keep in mind, I'm going to put some protocols down below for those things. I've had students who responded very, very well to weighted vests for about 10 minutes. And then they started nodding off. The sensory system can be very delicate balance. So you can be either hyper aroused or hypo aroused. Hyper aroused is where you're crazy. There's too much arousal. And hypo aroused, you're saggy and sleepy and you can barely keep your eyes open. And we're trying to keep kids in the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD, which means that's the area where the child is going to be able to learn. The child is not too under-aroused and the child is not too over-aroused. She's in the perfect zone for learning, the Goldilocks zone. We can manage this with sensory inputs, but we also have to really keep our eye on the child. For example, if this particular child I'm thinking of seemed crazy and was kind of bouncing off the walls, we'd put on the vest. He'd get really relaxed. He'd be able to listen. He'd be able to participate. And then if we didn't take the vest off in about 10 minutes and give him some time out of it, he would fall asleep and be unable to participate. So sometimes the zone is very small and we have to be very attentive to what is happening with the child. Sometimes the kid can wear that vest all day and it just feels great to the child. But then there's the problem that the child has gotten used to wearing this heavy vest all the time and isn't able to regulate himself without it, which is also a problem. So we don't want to leave these heavy vests on all the time unless the child absolutely cannot function without it. And even then, we need to wean off of it as soon as possible. We're trying to get the child's sensory system to normalize, not that it will be normal, but that it will be stable, and that maybe the child won't need so much extra input at some point. We want to always make it available in case it is necessary, but we want to try to help the child be as functional as possible with as little extra support as possible down the line. Slow process, but that's kind of what we're working for. So don't just leave the heavy vest on all day. if you can avoid it. Put it on. Then after your sensory diet time is over, take it off. But you can always have a little requesting card on your child's desk or on the wall of the fridge or in the bedroom or wherever that says heavy vest, and your child can always ask for the heavy vest or go over to the basket and pull up the heavy blanket onto herself. As far as things throughout the day, make sure that your child, if your child's in school, is in a school that does recess. I know it seems crazy in this day and age, but I did not go to a school that did recess. The principal was, I remember him being kind and thoughtful and helpful and not scary, but he didn't want parents to sue if their kids got hurt on the playground. So we just didn't have a playground, which seems insane to me now, knowing what I know about children's development and about how important movement is for kids' learning and development. So get your kids moving. Make sure that they're moving as much as possible. Even if it's cold outside, even if it's hot outside, go outside for a little bit. For as long as possible, that is safe. Of course, your kids need to be supervised, and of course they need to be safe, and they need to drink enough water or have their mittens on, but kids need to move. Running around, jumping on stuff, this is all very, very good for the sensory system, and it's going to help your kid to be more regulated. Also, if your child is really having trouble and is constantly craving this deep pressure, try Under Armour. It is a mild form of deep pressure because it's very squeezy clothing. It's tight. You want to get as the smallest size you can without inconveniencing your child. But it squeezes, but it's not super heavy. So potentially a child could just wear tight Under Armour the rest of his life. I had a student who did this. I don't actually know how he's doing as an adult, but I knew him when he was, I think, 3rd, 4th grade, and he wore really tight Under Armour every day, and without it, it was full meltdown, running away, don't talk to me, I can't look at you sort of difficulty. So it really made a huge difference for him, and it might for your kid too. If you're an adult, do weight training. Do go outside and run. I'm linking down below to a Couch to 5K program because I didn't actually have access to that when I started running a long time ago, but I did something very similar. Run for 30 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. Run for 30 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. Repeat 10 times and you're done. But you're still getting that pressure. If you can't run for some reason, walk. Jump on a trampoline. Do anything you can where you're getting a lot of pressure. And don't worry. I mean, if you already have bad knees, anytime you're going to start exercise, talk to your doctor first. But people who run throughout their adult lives have better joints than people who don't. So running is not the problem when it comes to bad joints. I did have a running injury, and some people do. You just, as my physical therapist said, if you get injured, you just get better. I thought that was a little glib at the time, but that is what I have done. And I think most times we can get better. Sometimes we do have to adapt our activity, so adapt where you must. But anytime you can get some good ground pounding in on your feet, that's great for your proprioceptive input. As I said, trampolines are great. Swimming is not bad for you or for kids because you are getting resistance there. If you can use resistance bands, that's great. Whatever you need to do, yoga is also great. Add these things to your routine. Notice what helps you the most. You can even do tracking for you and your child of which inputs are the most helpful. If my child was having 5 meltdowns per day, and then we started implementing a sensory diet time where we add in some proprioceptive things, we add in some tactile input, and we do that 3 times a day, and then my child is only having 1 meltdown a day. That might seem like maybe it's not full success, but it is, because you're only having 1/5 of the meltdowns. And usually that gets better over time as the children learn to manage themselves better. You can also track yourself. How am I coping with stress? Am I eating a bunch of junk food because my body's all dysregulated? Keep track of your own needs as well and how it's working as you try different strategies. I hope this video was interesting to you today. Proprioception is a big topic. It's a strange topic because it's not one of the senses that I was taught in school, and probably you weren't either. And we don't often think that our bodies might need more of a particular type of input. I know I didn't think about that before I got more training in this area. So I hope this video made you think, made you look at the world and your child's activities and all of the different ways that you function as a family, that your child experiences life at school. I hope you're thinking about all of that in a new and different way, and that you really are able to come up with some good creative strategies for your child and maybe for yourself too. I'll see you next time with a brand new video. Don't forget, if this was helpful to you, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can see my next video, which will be on the vestibular sense. Here's a hint. It has to do with your vestibular canals. I'm not telling you more than that until next time. I'll see you then. Have a great day. Bye. At a weird angle today.